Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. It is time for the June Q&A. And once again, I am social distancing monitor Steve. And I've got my sidekick Tim with me. Remote Tim, for me anyway.
Nah, it's in person over here. I've given you a box this time. We're using a different monitor from last time. We've got the Asus VG279QM, I believe. So that's a nice 280 hertz monitor. I thought I'd give you the speed boost this month, but unfortunately it's not tall enough for this. So we've got this Corsair power supply box that is sort of propping you up, but it's giving you a bit of a belly here, which I guess is nice.
Well, Tim's put me on a pedestal. That's quite fitting, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fair enough.
But anyway, getting past all that, we have June Q&A part 1. These are all the questions on the YouTube community tab. So if you want to get involved and ask your question, then you have to keep your eye out, because towards the end of the month, usually with a few days to go, or at least the last week, we ask for you guys to put some questions over on the community tab, and we get quite a few hundred. These are some of the more upvoted ones or the more interesting ones. And I think we should probably go get into them.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, first question here, nice and short one. We like to see that. When will the X570 Tomahawk, so MSI's new X570 Tomahawk motherboard, be available? So, of course, we have checked that board out on the channel. A lot of hype around that one because it has a particularly impressive VRM for a $200 US X570 board. It kind of makes the more expensive boards up to about $300 somewhat irrelevant. But unfortunately, it isn't really available, especially over in the US, and places that do have stock. A lot of price gouging going on. I saw some listings that were like $350 to $400, which is basically...
Really? That's crazy.
Yeah, absurd. So in Australia, it is 400 Australian dollars, which again sounds absurd, but it's actually not due to our currency in the local market and all that sort of stuff. So basically, all of the X570 boards are quite expensive here, though I think that's also somewhat true of the US. But anyway, it's priced to match boards such as, the ASRock Steel Legend. It's only about $20 or $30 more than Gigabyte's Gaming X, and it's a significantly better board than that. So it is still, if you're buying an X570 board now in Australia, the Tomahawk is available in good numbers, and it's by far the best option in that $400 price range, which is unfortunately fairly entry-level for us when it comes to X570 motherboards. As for the situation in the US, again, this board was announced quite some time ago now. I think we checked it out well over a month ago now.
Yeah, it feels like a while ago.
And again, MSI guaranteed or said that the price, the MSRP, was $200 US. Spoken to MSI a bit about it. No real official response from them, but it seems to be, well, surprise, surprise, the global pandemic is to blame for this one. So shipments are delayed. Large volume stuff that goes by sea freight is getting held up massively in the US. So a lot of delays there, getting processed and whatnot. So the boards are coming. And I guess once they do get enough stock and all that sort of stuff, you'll see them available for $200. But when that will be is hard to say. Obviously, we're seeing similar sort of delays for a lot of the B550 boards as well. A lot of the boards we want to test are a month away from the initial batch. No idea how many of those we'll get. But basically, I don't think it's sort of reasonable to get too upset with MSI on this one. As frustrating the situation is, I think it's mostly out of their hands.
Yeah, it is a bit disappointing that some of these boards, even just the B550 stuff sort of being announced and, you guys, you've reviewed it, at least some of the boards, in early June, and then, it's not going to come for another month. It's pretty disappointing considering how many people have been waiting for those particular boards, but that's just the way it is at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah, look, it's super disappointing. It is very frustrating, but unfortunately, I think all the people that are involved, or fortunately, they're doing the best they can to make the situation better, but their hands are tied. There's not much they can do about the issues they face on the manufacturing, to the shipping, to the processing, to getting it to distributors and retailers and all that sort of stuff. It's just everything's been slowed down massively. There's roadblocks at every step.
So this next question, I thought it's a pretty interesting one. We'll see what we have to say on it. Might be different to the normal scope of questions, but what potential implications do you think Mac switching to ARM has for companies like Intel and AMD who are very heavily invested in x86 hardware right now? Do you think we will see a gap develop with Windows/other machines remaining on the x86 architecture? Or do you think long-term that either Team Red or Blue might consider trying their hands at a desktop ARM chip? there's a lot of really interesting things to sort of come out of this. I think a lot of it is not really going to have that much of an impact on the Windows ecosystem right now, because realistically, I think people buy Macs not necessarily for the chips that are used in them, but more for the whole Mac OS side of things. So someone that uses Windows is not really going to suddenly go, oh, I'm going to switch over to Mac to use the ARM stuff, because they have to also switch over everything to a different operating system. So I think from that perspective, Intel is still going to get a lot of sales through Dell, HP, all those OEMs. Obviously, AMD was never in Apple products, sorry. So from that perspective, I think both of those companies are probably going to continue business as normal. What I think is going to be interesting to see is, how much more performance is Apple able to get out of their own silicon, especially combining that with their own operating system. Maybe there will be some things where, they have a really niche but really optimized solution that's quite competitive. But at the same time, I think Apple's going to do a really good job of the silicon. They are switching away from Intel. They're not switching away from AMD's latest processors. So a lot of the gains that they're going to get from there, they potentially could have got by using an AMD processor. We know that some of the mobile parts in particular can be like twice as fast. So if they're getting twice as much performance from an ARM chip, it starts to become an interesting battle there between not necessarily Intel, who are kind of lagging behind, but more sort of your AMD versus ARM. And then on top of that, another thing that I always think when these sort of ARM discussions come out is a lot of developers are going to have to rebuild their applications for ARM. Sometimes it might be from the ground up. A lot of the time it might be a significant change to the code. And I just wonder how much of the performance uplift they'll see comes from them redeveloping the entire application versus the actual benefits of the silicon. Because, for example, an app like Premiere or Photoshop, how much better would that be on x86 if Adobe decided to redo the entire application and sort of re-optimize it for modern processors? So I think there's just so many different angles to this that is going to be really interesting to see. As for will Intel and AMD start going down the ARM path? Maybe, I don't know. I think AMD did try one or two like ARM potential pathways at one point in time. I don't think it went particularly far, but you never know. I think companies will always try and find the best possible solutions that they can get with any sort of product. So yeah, it's a really interesting time coming up for all that, I think. Do you have any other thoughts to add on that one?
No, I think you covered that one pretty well, so I don't think I've really got anything else to add to that one.
All right, bit of a long one, this next one, but we'll get through it. There have been a bunch of lawsuits discussing if you are eligible for warranty if you upgrade a desktop PC, all coming to the same conclusion that a user should be able to do that without the fear of losing the manufacturer's support. How is it still a thing that some laptop manufacturers are still allowed to enable a whitelist in the BIOS, blocking all upgradability and making devices obsolete that only would need a recent Wi-Fi adapter to be perfectly usable for, say, working from home or remotely teaching kids? In times where the access to a computer is now a necessity in some areas, it's hard to understand how there is no class action lawsuit already regarding this issue that forces the laptop manufacturers to rethink this practice. So this really, I don't think either of us have really seen or heard much about this, because particularly in Australia, I don't think you'd be able to get away with this. We have very strict consumer laws in this country that would just be all over this from a sort of competition perspective. So yeah, I'm not sure how much of that is sort of region specific. Maybe you're in a region that has different laws that more allow this sort of thing, but it definitely sounds dodgy, doesn't it? Like the fact that they can just have a whitelist preventing some things from working is really not how, computers should be working, especially things that have slots available to them. I think we've seen a bit of that recently in the US with things like those warranty stickers that they've put over the sort of the screw hole, so you break that and they say, oh, you tried to upgrade it, you're not eligible for warranty anymore. And those are found to be invalid now, which is great. So I would definitely like to see more, heading down that path. But this seems a bit more sneaky, doesn't it? Like putting something in the BIOS to prevent like a Wi-Fi card working. It's very sneaky.
Yep. Yeah, again, I'm surprised by this because I personally have never run into this. I don't have a huge amount of experience upgrading laptops. I barely use one. But again, I haven't heard of any friends or family or anyone running into that, and I have upgraded a few components. And I think, well, generally with the laptops we've tested out from MSI and Asus and all those guys, we've changed memory and devices in them and never had a problem. The BIOSes seem fairly open, kind of like a BIOS you would find on the desktop motherboards. So we're obviously talking more about I don't know what companies, like a Dell type company, HP.
Yeah, probably just more of those OEMs that are more considering the entire user experience. So they'll probably come out and say something like, "Oh, we're doing this so that you don't accidentally install a incorrect Wi-Fi card or something." But really, I think if you're getting to the point where you just want to continue the longevity of your system, you should be allowed to at least experiment with the different Wi-Fi card. If it doesn't work, you can put the old card back in. So
it's not going to break it or blow it up or anything like that.
Yeah, and if it does, it's well beyond the sort of support lifetime of the product anyway. If you're talking upgrading a Wi-Fi card after 5 years, if you wreck it, I mean, it's kind of, you're trying at least to do something with it at that point. So
yeah, that's when it gets a bit dirty. They're forcing you into buying a new one. So yeah, we're very much against that, of course. All right, next question here. Compared to a metal backplate, how bad is a plastic backplate on a GPU cooler, so on a graphics card? Can it hurt the lifespan of the GPU because of trapping heat? Okay, so I don't think it can really hurt the lifespan because I don't think it's making that much of a difference. But compared to a metal, even a metal backplate, if there's no thermal pads, it's not really of benefit. It's more of an aesthetic thing, or you could argue it protects the backside of the card. If you were to be working on the CPU cooler and drop that on the card, it wouldn't sustain any damage where you might knock off some surface mount components or whatever without the backplate. But if you add some thermal pads to, say, behind the memory, behind the GPU, a small amount of heat that gets trapped there, some heat that is absorbed through the PCB, you can use the backplate as a heat spreader. Airflow going through the case can help remove some of the heat, so it is of benefit to cooling to do that. Obviously, a plastic backplate, no matter how many thermal pads you add, it's not extracting any heat, and that would actually probably make it even worse because you'd have less airflow. It'd be kind of like double glazed windows in a sense, where it traps that layer of air and creates a hot spot. So kind of the opposite effect you'd get with double glazed windows, but the air obviously eventually gets out, but you're creating a huge bottleneck. And a lot of those components that are, soldered to the PCB, a lot of that heat is absorbed through the backside of those components into the PCB, and you want that to quickly basically be extracted from the PCB. So putting a plate directly over that limits the amount of heat that can escape. So it's just, using plastic's a dumb idea. I mean, there's not much more to say about that. It's just stupid. It's not going to, if the card's right on the edge of what you would consider safe, then putting a plastic backplate on there is certainly not going to help. But for most of the cards, it's usually the low-end cards that run in like the 60-degree range, so it might add a few degrees. We haven't done this testing, of course. It's not helping, and it's dumb. So you shouldn't put a plastic backplate on a... And I've spoken to the companies about this. I've asked them why they do it, and they sort of recognize that it is dumb, but they're like, it sells cards. People want backplates. So they don't seem to care if they're plastic or not. They just want a backplate. So it's kind of on those guys that buy those cards because it has to have a backplate.
Question for you, Steve. Next one is, Ryzen 1st and 2nd gen, are they still worth buying in 2020, especially Ryzen 5 and Ryzen 7? Are they too old or still good for the time being?
Oh, well, it comes down to the price, doesn't it? So, actually, quite interestingly, I was looking at the Ryzen 5 1600 AF, which when I reviewed the 10th gen core stuff, that had shot up to $150 US, but it's now back down at $105 US. Of course, that's not really a first gen part, despite, the 1600 name. It's really a 2600 that's slightly downclocked. But as an example, that part's certainly worth buying at $105. That's quite a good buy still. But yeah, not really a good example because the Ryzen 5 1600, so not the AF version, the actual first gen part, that's more like $150 US. Obviously, that's a really bad buy because for like $10 more, you can get the third gen 3600. So yeah, definitely not worth buying new. I suppose a better example would be something like the Ryzen 7 1700, which I think was the first Ryzen processor you ever had, wasn't it, Tim?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah. The 1700 8-core 16-thread processor was one of the best value productivity parts from AMD in the initial Ryzen release. And those today brand new are selling at places like Amazon and Newegg for over $300 US, which is pretty insane. Obviously, stock's drying up, and I don't really know why you'd buy one, because you can get like the 2700 for $250 US or the 3700X for like $270 US. So obviously you would get those. But if you hop over to eBay, there's some completed listings for Ryzen 7 1700 parts for like $130 US. So $130 US, again, it depends on what you're doing. If you're gaming, not really a good buy, although it's 8 core, 16 thread, probably better off with something like the Ryzen 3 3300X. I know that sounds crazy because it's only a quad core with 8 threads, but it's going to be faster for gaming. I don't know if we've actually done those benchmarks on the channel, but it definitely would be better for gaming. But if it's productivity, core heavy workloads, then obviously the 8 core processor, twice as many cores, is going to be way better. Depends on your use case, but if you can get one secondhand for around that $130, $140 US and you want all the cores, it's probably the way to go. All right, the next one here. What is the most ridiculous or off-base product that has shown up in your mailbox intended for you to give a review or ad space to? Along the same lines, most ludicrous ad offer via email. Oh, boy.
So
wow.
much.
I mean, this is one of those ones that if we were sort of collating this information as we went and prepared, we could probably have a few doozies for you. But look, I mean, you name it. Think of something. It really doesn't matter what, and we will have got an email. We get so many emails in our publicly listed email address that I almost never check, but it's funny going through it sometimes. But, you know, I've been offered air conditioners to review, smart doorbells, dash cams, all kinds of stuff that, you know, it's kind of tech related, but obviously not stuff we cover. And then there's just like, there's definitely been some completely unrelated, not even tech related things that are just bizarre that we've been offered. None of that stuff's really turned up because we don't give our address to them. But yeah, lots of silly cooling products and things that are just complete and utter gimmicks that would just be embarrassing to look at on the channel in any serious capacity.
So many smartphone apps too. It's like, when have we ever covered a smartphone app like iOS games? Yep. Like, who cares about that stuff? And obviously you would have seen like dodgy CD key sites, dodgy VPNs. Those are always quite common, those sort of things as well. So there's
ludicrous.
So much crap.
That's right. Ludicrous would be the amount of money we get offered. So the CD key sellers, we don't even bother replying now because we get so many of them. They're obviously making an absolute killing with those dodgy keys. And one of the ones Tim just mentioned, or the one Tim just mentioned, we haven't replied to them in, a couple of years now, and we get seriously big dollar offers to run their stuff on our channel, and we're just not doing it. So, yeah.
It's garbage. All right, next question is, will you review the new LG CX 48-inch OLED TV for use as a monitor? LG have advertised it as the ultimate gaming display, so it would be nice to see how it compares to those $2,000 plus 4K 144Hz HDR monitors. Got this question a fair bit over the last couple of months once the CX has sort of come onto the market. I would like to check it out. It's probably a bit out of the sort of price range that we would spend buying a monitor or display for testing at the moment. So that's more on LG. If they want to send out a CX 48-inch, I'd be more than happy to test it. For me, the interesting thing with that is that it's so big. I think a lot of people would probably be a bit turned off against the 48-inch. I know there's definitely a lot of interest in this monitor, but to use a 48-inch monitor, you have to sit quite a way back to still get, the whole thing within your actual field of view. So I think as far as its use case as a monitor is concerned, it's going to be a bit of a niche product. And we tend to find when we cover those niche products like the super ultra wide monitors or the really big 43 inches that the interest isn't as much there as it is with like a 27 or 32 inch monitor. I'd love to see LG make a CX 32 inch. I think that would just be phenomenally good. Whereas the 48 inch, I think it's creeping down a little bit in size, but it's still a bit large at the moment.
Yeah, definitely niche just because of the price. But with the global pandemic, people shut in more, using their TVs and gaming systems and all that stuff a lot more. And it would be interesting to look at to see how it does compare, not just because it would be interesting, but a lot of people are turning to esports, driving simulators, all that kind of stuff's becoming really popular at the moment. And that's what you would use that for, because you would be sitting a bit further back with like your driving simulator type setup. Yeah. I think there's a lot more people doing that kind of gaming now than there was pre-pandemic.
I think even couch gaming, like you can use a PC with that, and people, I'm assuming, still also watch my monitor reviews for console gaming as well. You might be hooking up, say, next generation console that would make use of the 4K high refresh features of that display. I just looked at the price in the US on the CX because I wasn't actually aware of it, and $1,600 US does put it fairly high up on the price tier. That's at least the price on Best Buy. So yeah, from that perspective, again, the interest in $1,000 plus monitors we've seen hasn't been super high, but I would like to check it out just even just have like a reference as a really high quality OLED display, so we can at least look at it and say, okay, well, the LCDs are doing this, but there's also these OLED options. So it is definitely something to explore. I'm sure that would be very expensive here in Australia. So well, I hope LG will, if I reach out to them, we'll send one out, but you never know. All right, next question appears to be on some crystal ball AMD APU stuff. Will Cezanne APUs still use Vega graphics? When can we expect a transition to a cut-down RDNA 2 for APUs? And approximately how powerful will it be? Pretty difficult question to answer, let's be honest, because like a lot of these speculation things, we really don't have any concrete information on it. My expectation is that this current generation of Ryzen 4000 will be the last Vega design. It just, especially when they're moving like the console APUs over to sort of an RDNA 2 design, I think a lot of the focus I would expect for any upcoming desktop APUs would be more on the RDNA side. We could get something like Zen 2 plus RDNA as opposed to like Zen 3 plus RDNA. Who knows? How powerful will it be? That's just way too difficult to say. Way too difficult. It'll be faster, you'd think, but how much faster? Who knows? But yeah, I would definitely expect that this is the last generation of Vega based on sort of what we're hearing and seeing. Next question. What do you think of the big.LITTLE architecture Intel is going to implement? So for those that aren't aware, the big.LITTLE architecture is generally a principle. I think it was first that term coined by ARM, so I don't think Intel will necessarily use that exact term. It's probably trademarked. But you have sort of like a couple of big CPU cores that are really powerful for your high performance single thread tasks, and then you pair that with many more, like maybe twice or 4 times as many smaller cores that can be used at really low power. So you put your low power tasks like playing music or playing videos onto those cores, and you sort of get this balance of 2 different architectures that allow you to get the best performance within a certain wattage. And I think it's, generally speaking, for mobile products a really good idea, because if you think about maybe not necessarily your 15 watt designs, but maybe more your 5 watt designs, you could theoretically run maybe 1 or 2 really high performance cores within 5 watts and shut all the other cores off. But then for low performance tasks where you might be running many things in the background, you might want to split that up among some of those more efficient, low power background task optimized cores so you can save power. I think the way that a lot of mobile designs are going is there's going to be more and more highly optimized, highly specific things put into them to save power, because it's the only way we're going to get more and more efficient designs out of it. So by having those sort of maybe 1 large performance core, which I think is Intel's design, they're going with like a 1+4 or something like that. That's at least my memory of what the design's going to be. I think it's a really compelling and interesting way to do it. And when you pair that up with more accelerators, more, GPU offloading, more offloading to video encoding and decoding engines, audio engines, you start getting, much more optimized design. So I think it's going to be, quite a successful path to go down, at least for those low power chips.
Another one. Well, we might have missed your other question. What product comes to your mind that you purchased after it looked promising, but then you regretted deeply after getting the product in hand? I imagine you're sort of asking about computer-related stuff. Nothing really comes to mind on the computer front. Quite recently, I bought a Handycam. I wanted to use it as an alternate camera for unboxing boxes, and also the Patreon behind-the-scenes videos that I make using my GH5 with its big lens is a real pain in the backside for vlogging type stuff. So I bought a Panasonic Handycam. I think it was the something 700. I don't remember. It was about $800 Australian. It's a 4K, I think it was 30 FPS little Handycam thing, and the quality on it was terrible. Super grainy, even in the studio with all the lights. It was like webcam quality, I thought. So I took that back and got a refund. So that was disappointing. It wasn't the end of the world. It was just a big waste of my time.
Yeah, I always find it's those product categories. There's always great reviews these days for all the PC components. So I think it's kind of hard to, buy a graphics card and regret it, big time, where you can just look at so many reviews. But a lot of those other categories, like, cameras tend to have reasonable reviews sometimes, but I just find things like appliances, you buy something, it's like, oh, that's, there's some flaws with this, or, that sort of thing. You just buy those sort of things, but there's just no reviews for anything. So it's much easier to get burnt on those sort of purchases.
Yeah, I watched quite a few reviews on this Handycam thing as well, but I think it was a lot of stuff like out at the beach on a sunny day.
Yeah.
Not sort of, in my shed where the ISO just goes through the roof and it looks terrible. So, yeah, it looked okay on paper. I knew it wasn't going to be amazing, but it was super disappointing how bad it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you say, a lot of those products, the sort of white goods don't have a lot of detailed reviews. And obviously when it comes to computer components, like if I had bought something like the Asus Strix 5700 XT, that would obviously make the list, but we just got sampled that. Yeah. I mean, for you, it'd probably be like the Asus A15 laptop that you bought that you were disappointed with. I mean, that would be one for you, wouldn't it?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, that was more for a review purpose, not necessarily buying it to actually use. So how much you can count being disappointed with that is, yeah. But yeah, I agree.
Okay, we're going to hit the pause button there. That is enough questions for part 1 of this month's Q&A. And yeah, a lot of good questions there. All the usual stuff. What do you reckon, Tim?
Yeah, it's turned out pretty well.
What's your take on it? Oh, you were happy with that?
Yeah, love answering questions. It's great. So I guess this means we've got...
That almost sounded sarcastic.
What? I enjoy doing the Q&A. He
actually does enjoy.
Yeah, the Q&A. I enjoy doing the Q&As. It's always good to hear your feedback and get some questions in. And I'm looking forward to part 2, which will be up on the channel shortly. Maybe next week. Not quite sure how the schedule's going to go, but there's definitely a second part of YouTube questions to get through. Then the Patreon stuff for part 3. So, yeah, lots of interesting stuff to get to.
Awesome. Well, we should probably get on with it.
Yeah, let's do it.
But yeah, thanks for watching this one. I am social distancing monitor Steve on a pedestal.
Yep, I'm in-person Tim. I'll catch you in the next one.
See ya.